All right, welcome everybody. My name is Amanda Williams, and I'm joined as always by Jim Zobel, and we are both historians here at the MacArthur Memorial. And we both talk almost every single day about MacArthur history. We talk a lot about the controversies, right? We talk a lot about recent scholarship and interpretation of MacArthur's life and career. But we also talk a lot about the lesser known parts of his story. And we have one of those today for you. Now, in July 1961, an 81-year-old General MacArthur made a 10-day farewell trip to the Philippines to mark the 15th anniversary of Philippine independence. It was a particularly moving visit for him and for many of the people there that saw him. And in Manila alone, millions of people turned out to greet him. And only papal visits have exceeded the welcome that MacArthur received in the Philippines in 1961. So today we're going to talk about that visit. So Jim, prior to that 1961 visit, when was the last time that Douglas MacArthur was in the Philippines?
Well, it was 15 years to the day. That was the Independence Day ceremony that they had in July 4th of 1946. And MacArthur flew from Tokyo, where he was as the Supreme Commander of the Allied Powers. He flew to Manila to represent the United States in the Independence Day ceremony. And that was the last time in 15 years. The thing about, the MacArthurs in the Philippines is his dad's career was really cemented there. It was made there. He had served 3 different tours there. He met his wife there. His son is born there. His mom dies there. They live in the Manila hotel there for years. So it's home. It's home to the MacArthurs. And so this is a very special thing to both of them, going back this 15 years later.
Now, after 1952, it seems that MacArthur doesn't do a lot of traveling. He doesn't accept a lot of the invitations that are sent to him. What prompts the 1961 visit?
Well, you're right. Yeah, when he gets back, he toured the States for those 2 years from 51 through 52 and gave so many speeches at all the different cities. But after that Republican National Convention in July of 1952, MacArthur pretty much sequestered himself up in the Waldorf Astoria, up in the tower there. The only place he went for an award was in 55 when they dedicated the MacArthur Park there in Los Angeles. And he went and gave 3 of his birthday speeches, the abolition of war speech, the most famous one. But MacArthur is not in very good health. He had retired or had been fired by Truman when he was 71 years old. And he comes home and he has a lot of problems. The thing about MacArthur, he never goes to the doctor or anything. And it's not until finally the late 50s, early 1960 that MacArthur will finally go to the doctor and have some of these problems corrected. So by 61, when he's 81, he's feeling kind of good. They go in April, they go down to Palm Beach, Florida. He goes with Gene and Arthur. He goes to Michigan University in June, right before the trip to the Philippines, where he'll accept, they give him a doctoral degree there. So he's starting to move around a lot more. And then in early May, when the Philippines start getting ready for this 15th anniversary, that's when Garcia, who's the president, and Carlos Romula, who had been MacArthur's one of his aides and one of his guys during World War II, that they start pushing this thing for MacArthur to come back to the Philippines for this anniversary.
Now, he's going to attend as a private citizen, but he has a lot of support from the US government. I understand that President John F. Kennedy is pretty delighted that they're honoring MacArthur with this invitation. How does the president help facilitate this trip?
Well, he had just, the MacArthur and Kennedy had just had that first meeting up in the Waldorf Astoria in New York City back in April. That was, when Kennedy was going around getting all the advice about the Bay of Pigs, what to do about Cuba, and, about Indochina and stuff. And so he and MacArthur had really hit it off at that point. And so then when they approach, they let Kennedy's office know that the Philippines are officially inviting MacArthur to attend this. And even MacArthur says, I'm not an official representative, I'm going as a private citizen. But Kennedy gives him the VC-137, this 707 jetliner for him to use. They assign a doctor, Lieutenant Colonel Sheedy from the Surgeon General's office. He'll go with MacArthur and the party there, because MacArthur's now 81 years old. And then as well, MacArthur doesn't have a passport or anything. Gene doesn't have a passport. They, never needed one when they were doing all that traveling with the military. And so they immediately have to get passports, and the State Department lets MacArthur know that they can help facilitate this, and as soon as he needs them done, that they can do this. So everybody's pushing the effort towards helping him. But like he said, he's not an official representative. It was interesting because we were looking through it, and Richard J. Marshall, who was MacArthur's deputy chief of staff in World War II, he writes to MacArthur and says, if you're looking for an aide to go with you, you should pick John Olson. And Olson was 57 scouts captured on Bataan Death March, and anybody who knows anything about the Philippines knows this guy. And I wonder if Olson even knew that he'd been recommended, but because MacArthur wasn't an official rep, he wasn't going to have an aide. Courtney Whitney goes with him, but he goes as like his secretary, or his friend.
Right. And you mentioned his passport, and we were actually looking at his passport the other day, and I made a little copy of it. I love the fact that on his passport they have a photograph from World War II, and he's wearing a hat. Most people can't wear a hat and a passport.
1942. Yeah.
Yeah. So I thought that was just fantastic. Yeah. And then the fact when we were looking through it, there's no stamps, there's no entry or exit mark. So I mean, clearly the State Department fast-tracked a passport for him, and then it looks like they didn't use it because. Well,
I mean, he steps off the plane in Manila, and there's 18,000 people at the airport itself going absolutely insane.
Yeah.
It wasn't like come on, General, let's go tag
let's go through customs.
Yeah. It was basically like get in the car because there's a 1.5 million people waiting in the streets for you. So yeah, they never stamp it or anything, going in or exiting, and it's the only time he goes anywhere that whole time.
Right. Okay, so walk us through his itinerary in the Philippines. Where does he go? What does he see?
Well, MacArthur, said that he was looking forward to this with so much anticipation, but he realizes that most of his great friends from the Philippines are already in the cemetery, and he even says that. And so MacArthur is, as soon as the word goes out that he's going to be going, he starts getting letters from, people that had served under him, this Bahala Na Association of all these guerrillas and supporters of the guerrillas, Chick Parsons and all these people he had worked with during World War II, as well as all the VFW groups. One of the great guerrillas of the Philippines from Luzon, this guy Marking, is head of this group. And so everybody wants a piece of him. And the thing is that the Philippine government has delineated what he'll do. And even when they find out he's coming, you've got Yoshida in Japan saying, we want you to come here, and you've got Chiang Kai-shek saying you have to stop here when you come. And so all these nations out there, once they know MacArthur's coming, they're all wanting him on the docket, come stay at our house, and all this. But the Philippines have it structured out. He'll get there on July 3rd. They have the movement through the streets. Like I said, there's 1.5 million people there just going absolutely crazy. They have a dinner that night at Malacañang Palace. The next day, they have the Independence Day ceremonies. MacArthur will go and raise the flag at the Rizal Monument. He'll go visit Quezon's tomb, the first president. He'll go visit Manuel Rojas's tomb. He'll go visit Quirino's tomb, you know, all these early presidents of the Philippines. He'll go to the Manila American Cemetery, which is down in the old Fort McKinley area. And so he's paying tribute to all these fallen heroes of the Philippines. And there are just hundreds of thousands of people everywhere he goes. Like you said, probably only, you know, the most recent of the papal visits was anything bigger than MacArthur going to the Philippines. On the 5th, he has a big banquet with all the veterans of the wars and they'll have that at the Manila Hotel. The next day, they dedicate the highway from Lingayen, the invasion beaches down to Manila. They dedicate the MacArthur Highway, and he takes a train that morning up to Dagupan and Lingayen, and then he'll take a motorcade back. He goes to Magsaysay Stadium. There's 200,000 people there he'll speak to. He'll go through Tarlac, he'll speak there. But one of the coolest things of the trip happens on that drive, because they're going through Tarlac and MacArthur sees this road and he's like, go down that road. And the people are like, but that's not on the itinerary, you know? And he's like, no, go down that road. And they go down it. And that's where MacArthur's headquarters for the drive to Manila was this, it's just a house that had a bunch of outbuildings. It's owned by the Cojuangcos now. And MacArthur shows up at the door and doesn't knock, just walks in. And the lady's like, oh, the general, he's back, you know, just like, we've been waiting for you. We didn't know if you would come. And General MacArthur walks all around. And he's just totally, you know, in the moment. And that's the way he is the whole time. Everything is just flushed with all this emotion. He said, you know, all my greatest memories were in the Philippines, all my triumphs, you know, all my disasters were here. And so everywhere he goes, it's just this mass of emotion. And then they get back to Manila the next day. He's on a Philippine ship, the Lapu-Lapu. They go down to Leyte, where the landing was in 44. 250,000 people, 500,000 people there. Then they go to Cebu, where he meets former President Osmeña. And Osmeña is like, he's only a few months away from death. And he says to MacArthur, what took you so long to come back? And MacArthur makes a quip, well, the powers in Washington wouldn't let me come back till now. We finally have a young president who's let me come, you know, very, you know, off-guard moment. You know, what's he talking about? Because MacArthur had said before, when like Australia invited him, that he said that the government won't let me go there. So, you know, what did that all mean, you know, from those early years? But then he goes to Panay on the 10th, and then they finally make the run back to Manila. And on the way back to Manila, they stop at Corregidor. And 5,000 people had made the trip across Manila Bay to see MacArthur there. And this is where it all falls apart. You know, they had been able to hold it together that whole time, all these grave sites, meeting all these people. But as soon as they step on Corregidor, you know, MacArthur's just somber, silent, and Jean had been pretty strong the whole time. She just starts bawling, and she will not stop the whole time they're there on Corregidor, because they knew all those people that went into prison camp. They knew all those people that died on the hell ships. And this, you know, this is the place. And they were supposed to eat lunch there, but they can't do it. Jean's just still crying, and they get on the ship and they go back to Manila, and MacArthur will receive another, you know, honorary degree from the Philippines. The next day he's at the airport, you know, and President Garcia had broken protocol the whole time. He's there at the airport to meet MacArthur. He goes with him to all these sites. He's there at the airport, and at the airport when he's saying goodbye, you know, and MacArthur had said the whole time, I can never say I shall return again. That's the meaning of this trip, you know, to say goodbye. And Garcia is like, well, you know, you can't return, but you'll never leave us. And that's when he loses it. You know, he just starts crying, and everybody at the airport is just you know, losing it. And that's the thing, that this was so emotional, and everybody around the world freaked out on it, because, just like the communists do. All they do is label America as racist, colonialist, imperialist. And here goes MacArthur back here, and 3 million people turn out, just with this outpouring of love and emotion and, thanks, and just obliterating that communist rhetoric that's coming out. And that's what everybody back home says, is we need an ambassador like this, and that's the thing with MacArthur. All these countries that he had these relationships, they didn't look at it as, oh, we've got this relationship with the United States. They like, we've got this relationship with him. And as long as he's there, they're not going to let us down, And so that was the, when you want to think about the importance of this trip, that's the importance, because all of, Latin America was just this imperialist, expansionist, racist America, and MacArthur going back there just blows the whole argument right out of the water.
I know a lot of people always ask us, what do we think a MacArthur presidency would have looked like? And I think, to me, I don't know that I've ever been very interested in that. I've always been more interested in what would a MacArthur Department of State look like? Had he been a Secretary of State? He's multilingual, he's anti-colonial, he didn't have an issue, or, he didn't see race the way most people did at the time. I just wonder, in terms of a Cold War argument for America, would he have been that better foot forward? Would he have been able to talk to people in South America, Africa, Asia, and say, this is who I am, you know who I am?
Yeah.
I think I think that would have been fascinating. The presidency, I'm not so sure. Secretary of State might have been an excellent job for him.
And there was even people in Congress that were saying that, we should set up this special ambassadorship for MacArthur, to be the goodwill ambassador, of the United States. But he was only a couple of years away from death himself at that point, because he did falter, a few times on the trip, just because it is exacting schedule. I mean, from 7:30 in the morning till 10 o'clock at night, he's nonstop on the go, and it's raining the whole time that he's there. It's just it's just crazy.
Well, do you want to comment any more about his health on the trip beyond that? I mean, do we know anything specific?
He doesn't collapse or anything like that. All his speeches are right on cue, but he says, each time I need to get there, I'll go to this place and I'll speak. I can't be doing a lot of moving around, and I think that's just, he was having a hard time. He's 81 years old. Even back during World War II, he was complaining he had chicken legs and it was hard for him to, walk, So you can understand that, that it's a lot for an old guy.
Right. And we have great photographs of the trip in the archives here. And in a lot of the pictures, you see him with his arm around someone, I think, for stability, or you see Gene right there with him, or you see, it's raining and his half of his uniform is like soaked. So it was clearly very arduous, and incredible strength of will, I think, to get through the entire thing, and then just add all the emotional.
Yeah, they cut out a lot of places they wanted him to go. Like they wanted him to go up to Baguio, they wanted him to go to various other places, but he was just, that's going to be too much, for one day. I've got to do these things differently. So he had a lot to say about, how they would schedule it out and what he would be able to stick with.
Now, when he comes back to the United States, he gets, I guess, a couple days of rest, and then he goes down to Washington, D.C. to meet with President Kennedy. What do they talk about, and how do we, I think you've already touched on this, but how do we understand this trip through the lens of the Cold War?
Well, yeah, I think we did. It was very much a boost for American prestige, and a slap in the face to the communist rhetoric, that was always spitting out, about things. And in that sense, it, you know, it very much was a Cold War thing. I mean, you've still got the problems in Taiwan are still very much, you know, big at that point. You just had a coup in South Korea. Ri had been thrown out, but then the military again, you know, prompted the new group out. You've got problems in Laos with the, you know, the communist movement there. So, and then of course you've got Latin America exploding with Fidel and Che, you know, trying to cause as many fires as they can. And so this whole thing really was like a, I think the Allies took a lot from it, you know, that the Philippines had poured out like this, you know, and they were hoping it would be like when Kennedy went to Japan the year before and there was riots, not Kennedy, but Eisenhower, and there was riots and things like that within the country, but it didn't work out that way here. So I mean, it was a very emotional thing for them, and I think it was to finally say goodbye to all those ghosts and to you know, just they wanted to see it one more time. You know, they wanted to see it one more time.
And the talk with Kennedy, do we know much about that though?
Yeah, we don't really know what they had to say. We've got all those transcripts of the talks they had later on in '62 and whatnot, but you know, obviously they talk about the Philippines. When they interviewed Pierre Salinger, who was Kennedy's public relations guy, he said, you know, I'm not going to comment on it. Of course, there were some newspaper articles later on that said they talked about Indochina, Laos, you know, all these things that were on the table. And later on, we know that MacArthur would tell Kennedy, you know, don't get involved in a land war in Asia, and you know, you've got no business being over there, and Kennedy would use that. But you know, the exact wording of this talk, we don't really know. We have the pictures, you know, Vice President Johnson was there, and everybody else as well. So I imagine they talked about quite a few things, but I just, you know, the exact words we don't know, like we do about the later talks.
Any final thoughts about the trip?
No, it was a cool thing to look into. You know, it was just it was an eye opener how all these guerrillas came out of the woodwork. You know, and I didn't know that Chang and Japan had invited him there. So it's another great topic you picked. Way to go, Amanda.
All right. Well, thanks for joining us. We will be back in maybe another month.
Okay.